So, we mentioned in the last lecture that every industry can be divided into uh, different categories due to different competition degrees. And why do firms have different competition? It's because of the features that they have. We have already dealt with perfect competition and the extreme end of it, monopoly. Perfect competition was about similar products sold by small similar firms with no market edge and complete competition, no barriers to entry or exit. On the other hand, we had monopoly, which was the opposite. You had a unique product sold by a single firm, a lot of barriers to entry and exit, and have the 100% market shares. Now, the thing is, Edward Chamberlain, as it mentions below, was dissatisfied with the two extreme theories of its time. And he said, you know what? Because we can see it in reality that this is not what's happening. So, they came up with monopolistic competition and another one which was oligopoly. All right. So these were the market structures that they came up with. Obviously, they had some differences in them, but perfect competition can change into monopolistic competition if they decide that the product can be differentiated. But then, if the firms have dominance, they can move towards an oligopoly as well. Even perfect competition firm can move into an oligopoly. Um, but that's a much more high stake business, having a greater market share and eventually leading towards monopoly. Now, don't think that this is the evolution for the firm. Okay, this is not always how it happens. Sometimes certain firms just starts up with this idea, like Facebook, let's say, started off as a monopoly, and then there could be new hotel chains or airline that can directly jump into an oligopoly market structure. Okay, so let's going into the details of it. Basically, let's look at some features of it. The main features about monopolistic competition about the product is that the products are differentiated. The products are differentiated or also known as heterogeneous. Okay. As far as number of buyer goes, there are many buyers, and in fact, there are many sellers. So, how is it different from perfect competition then? Well, we'd say the number of firms are fewer than in perfect competition. All right. Uh, but more than monopoly, more than oligopoly, that's for sure. Then, how about the sales concentration ratio? We'll say, oh, the market shares are quite insignificant. So, if the market shares are insignificant, again, how is it different from perfect competition? Well, we'll say that it's relatively more than perfect competition. Slightly more, not too much more. But how about the entry and exit situation? Well, we say there are no barriers. Anyone can enter, anyone can exit the industries. Okay. And as a result of this, when there is no barriers, in the short run, you will be able to make abnormal profits and normal profits. Sorry, abnormal profits and economic loss. But in the long run, you will always end up with normal profit. Now, remember one thing, the demand curve, like in perfect competition, we say that the firms are price takers because of the perfect knowledge and the product is just too similar for everyone. But when you differentiate your product, even slightly, then it gives you the ability to have a downward sloping curve. Okay? Or it even has to do with the sale concentration ratio. If you have if you have like insignificant market share, then you don't have much power. But still, if you are fewer than perfect competition, it will give you slightly more edge. So, for example, if I talk about restaurant business, we know there are lots and lots of restaurant business selling pizzas. Okay. Now, the thing is that some of the firms have a little more edge over the other. Why? Because their differentiation, consumer tends to like it, and they've created a brand for themselves, and so the consumers have some loyalty creating because of that, and that causes the demand curve to go downwards. Okay. um as far as your profitability goes, profitability really depends on the barriers to entry and exit. If there are no barriers, you will end up with a normal profit. If you have significant barriers, you might not have to go to normal profits in the long run. So let's see how the demand curve works. We're going to compare some demand curves here. So in perfect competition, we saw the demand curve like this, and we called it D equals to AR equals to, I'll call it for now DPC, representing perfect competition. Okay, demand, this one is for perfect competition. And if you have like this, then your PED tends to be infinite. Monopoly, when we were doing, and we said, oh, they're the only ones in the market. So for them, the demand curve is very steep, and we wrote that in one of the features. That for Monopoly, this is how it looks like. DM represents Monopoly, and it's relatively steeper. So the PED for this should be less than 1. That means they're inelastic. Whereas for monopolistic competition, it's like this. It's more elastic. Okay? This is for monopolistic competition. And it's relatively more elastic. So please make sure you know this. This is inelastic. This is less inelastic. This is even more less inelastic. This is perfectly elastic. This is less elastic, and this is less elastic. So you have to know how the comparison basically goes. Okay, with your less elastic, less inelastic, and all that. So that's how the demand curve looks like. So for this, the PED for monopolistic competition, PED will be greater than 1. Why? Because there is a lot of competition. There are many firms selling. It's going to be like, it's a similar product, but with slight differentiation. All right. It is like the pizza and the burger. It's not like completely a whole new idea of something. All right. Anyhow. So how will the pricing and output decision be? Well, let's just work with that. The pricing and output decision. So we have suggested that the demand curve should be highly elastic. Okay. So the demand curve is, sorry, my bad. The demand curve is highly elastic. We'll call it D equals to AR is equals to price. So if demand curve is highly elastic, the MR curve has to be highly elastic as well. That's my MR. Then we're going to need a marginal cost curve. We have the marginal cost curve. And finally, we have a profit maximizing. Now, again, if there is no mention of what kind of profitability we're dealing with, then we are dealing with profit maximizing condition. And the price will be suggested by the demand curve. And so this is the price you're going to charge. Just like Monopoly, there is not much difference between this and Monopoly. Okay? So what we're going to see now is we've mentioned this before also that they can, if they change their objective from profit maximization and they end up producing a different quantity, well, the price has to come from the demand curve. Okay? So that's how this would work. All right. So now I'm just going to take this diagram from above. Um, so basically, let us work our profitabilities here. Okay. First, I will draw for normal profit. Yesterday we saw that for normal profit the condition is average revenue should equals to average cost. Now over here we need to figure that out. Where is it? So at QO, this is where average revenue is, and this is where average cost needs to intersect. So let me highlight this. This is the point where average cost needs to go. So I bring my average cost and I connect it to this point right here. So mera pehla condition is being met. I am going to have a normal profit. My second condition I need to meet is the relationship between marginal cost and average. The average should always intersect marginal at its minimum, and then it can be on its way up. ठीक हो गया? And so now we have a normal profit. Simple as that. Just like Monopoly, there is no difference between this and the Monopoly diagram that we've made. Let's try the other one. Now, we're going to try and make one for abnormal profit. Okay? So for an abnormal profit, we know that average revenue should be greater than average cost at QO. So at QO, average revenue is here, so average cost needs to be on the lower side. So I'll make it somewhere around, I'm going to cross it through here. So my average cost comes like this, intersects this here, hits the minimum on marginal cost, on its way up. That's my average cost. At QO, this is where average cost was, and above was, so if I highlight this, this becomes my abnormal profit. This is happening for monopolistic competitive firm. You have an abnormal profit. Then we'll do it for an economic loss. So in an economic loss situation, the average revenue tends to be less than average cost. And at QO, this is where average revenue is. So average cost needs to be a little on the higher side, somewhere up here. Bring it down, hit the minimum on marginal cost, on its way back up. It's highlighted. And this becomes my economic loss. Now, this diagram is exactly like what we have done in the monopoly situation. There's nothing different in it. Now, whenever we see in monopolistic competition that you have an economic loss or you have an abnormal profit, फौरन से समझ जाओ हम short run के अंदर है. because perfect competition और monopolistic competition जो पहले दो basic हमारे market structures हैं, you will never have in the long run economic loss or a normal abnormal profit. It's just not possible. So how will the market, if it's making an abnormal profit, how will it go to a normal profit? So this is what's happening. So you have these pizza shops making exceptional amount of money, and a lot of people see that, you know what, there's a lot of money in this pizza business. So if we start delivering, slightly differentiating the product with coming up with good deals, or maybe coming up with a good brand name, or maybe coming up with different flavors or something which can capture people's mind and stuff like that, and they come up with the unique selling point. Okay. They open shop. Now the thing is, in perfect competition, when competition came in, it affected the industry supply, because like in the in the mask business, we said कि अगर competition comes in, the industry supply will increase, because people can't really tell the difference between the masks. So for them, all masks are the same unless it's like N95 or something. Well, otherwise, the basic mask 3-ply is exactly the same as everyone is selling. So in that case, the industry supply shifts because it's the same product. But over here, because the product is differentiated, you say you have your own unique demand curve. It's different from everyone else's. Okay? So when a new pizza shop comes in, it does not increase the supply, but it actually steals away the demand from other people, and it increases its own demand. Okay? So for a firm like over here was making abnormal profit. It's like, let's say it's California Pizza. It's making abnormal profits right here. And so new people, Pizza Max, or I don't know what all names have come up, Broadway Pizza and all these, they see there's a lot of abnormal profits. So they open a similar thing, but with a little different branding and flavors and stuff. What it does for this firm right here is they're going to lose demand. Okay, so when they lose demand, their demand curve obviously has to shift to the left. The demand is going to fall down. So I'm going to take this demand, I'm going to start moving it to the left. The demand has fallen down to D1. Now, when the demand falls down, obviously the MR changes. Okay, so the MR has changed to MR1. Now, when MR has changed, obviously the profit maximizing condition has to be altered now. So when I change that, my new profit maximizing condition becomes MR1 equals to MC, and so the existing firm after competition will be able to produce less. And what about the price? Well, the price they're going to charge will be lesser also. What kind of profits are you making now? It's right here at D1 and AC. I'm going to see, because D1 is the same thing as AR1. So average revenue 1 and average cost is meeting right here. That means the firm is making normal profit. This is how it goes. This is how you might have to draw in the exam when you're showing how monopolistic competition goes from the short run abnormal profit to a long run normal profit. The demand goes down. Why? Because competition comes in and steals your demand away. I hope that's clear. If it's too difficult for you to make this one, all you need to show is you have an abnormal profit situation, you make your demand curve shift to the left to D1, and then after that you can just make your normal profit curve diagram with D1, MR1, P1, Q1, that situation, to show that you've reached your normal profit. You can do that also, but if you can make this one nicely like 10 लाइंस के ऊपर एक अच्छा सा डायग्राम बड़ा सा with like nice clarity and an explanation, you're perfectly good to go with that one. Now, this was the case for abnormal profit. What if you have an economic loss? Well, if you have an economic loss, this is what your situation is. And economic loss, not all firms will be able to manage. Like even in food industry, is a very high percentage of business closures. It's just that we hear about the successful ones, but we never hear about the ones that are closing. So there are so many restaurants that do open up and they fail. The only one who exit the industry are the people who cannot take X number of losses. Because when you join that industry, you need to know that you should be able to sustain certain percentage of loss. Because why does that happen? Because when there are losses, some firms will exit the industry. And so the consumers will move on to the ones who are surviving. So over here, if you have an economic loss and few firms shut down, what's going to happen is that the demand curve for your firm is going to go up. Demand's going to start rising. Okay? And it's going to move to D1. As far as your MR goes, obviously, if demand has increased, the MR needs to change as well. The MR is going to change. And when that happens, when MR has changed, automatically we will have a new profit maximizing condition at a higher quantity because you're going to sell more. Customers are coming to you. And the price you're going to charge is going to be relatively higher than before. And if you see over here, your average revenue is equals to your average revenue 1 is equals to average cost, and you end up at a normal profit. This is how an economic loss in the short run can become a normal profit in the long run. Now remember, as long as you are just going in between these economic loss and abnormal profit, every time you're going to achieve normal profit, that will be your long run situation. To avoid the complexity in the exam, all I would suggest is you show an economic loss diagram, you shift the demand curve to the right to DR1, somewhat like a tangent to the average cost curve that you've made. And then after that, you can make a normal profit with D1, MR1, and P1 and Q1, and you can just do the explanation for it.